Sundance was just one of those magical moments where I was like, oh, this is it. This is the thing. The digital enhanced the real, and our level of connection is so much more meaningful now that we've had that experience together.
And it sounds amazing, but also a little bit, this is stepping into the matrix. Are we, when we're old, Dana, are we gonna plug in and just be in different virtual worlds? Hello friends, Makes You Wonder is back with our 4th episode. I am quite proud that we made 4 already. We're learning, we're improving. I'm hoping the format will evolve a little bit as we go, so please stick with us. I'm hoping you're enjoying it as much as I am, as we're trying to do this while doing a million other things at work. I hope everyone can appreciate that. I'm once again back from the farm where I was last week in our last episode, and in my regular studio here in Hoboken. Say hello to the Fig. Baby Yoda is over there, and I'm Oskar. If you're new to the show, this is where I have conversations with people from the intersection of art and technology about the future of human creativity in the age of artificial intelligence. And I am super thrilled that you are tuning in again today. And if you haven't already, please give us a follow wherever you listen or watch this show. And if you are so inclined, maybe give us a give us a little honest 5-star review. It would tremendously help our chances to get discovered by more viewers and listeners. So please do that if you are so inclined. You can also pop over to LinkedIn to find me and say hi. I'm Oskar, Oskar, Serander, Serrander. You'll see my name around here. There's also links in the show notes. I'm also on X and Threads. Can't really say why I'm there. Maybe you can help me out with that. But we're always very keen to hear comments about the show. If you have a guest suggestion or any other reflections that you want to share about the content, please reach out to me or any of these links that you find in the show notes. My guest today is Dana Ware. And boy, this is a really fun conversation. Dana is an expert in AR, VR, and spatial computing, which I think are fascinating areas. And I'm also a bit of a gamer, so I couldn't resist but getting quite heavily into that subject matter. Currently, Dana is the Chief Creative Officer at Around. And Around is a shared augmented reality platform that boosts fan engagements with immersive and interactive live experiences in the stadiums. So if you go watch your favorite sports team, you can pull up Around and interact with elements around you and with your friends, etc. It's a really cool experience to kind of elevate live shows and sporting events. And as the Chief Creative Officer, Dana creates AR experiences and stories that blend virtual and physical realities in new ways. And I think that's a fascinating area on how we can blend these virtual worlds with physical objects around us, something that I think we haven't seen that much of yet, but I firmly believe is a big, big part of our future, especially how gaming and film storytelling are starting to blend together so nicely, and adding entertainment and live events to that mix. There's some interesting technologies that are certainly emerging now and in the future. She's also very passionate about advancing the AR and VR industry through the inclusion of underrepresented voices. And she's serving now as the chair for Women in Games, which is a special interest group in the International Game Developers Association. And she's also a future reality summit advisor for the Game Developers Conference. She's also a professional speaker. She has been a professor at university teaching people under NDA, which she will talk about, which is amazing. And she's also a leading international voice in the AR and VR gaming industry. I do want to flag that we will briefly touch on the topic of sexual assault in this episode in a story about a virtual reality experience that Dana experienced at Sundance many years ago. That's going to be a little later in the episodes. I just wanted to flag that for anyone who is sensitive to talking about that subject. I met Dana in Cannes this year when I was back again in Cannes and the Croisette for the first time in a few years. It was really fun. and we had a discussion with her and lots of other folks down there about the future of sports and fan experience. And I was very happy to sit down with her today to learn so much more about her. She's a fantastic woman and a leader and just a bursting with creativity and that energy that just left me super inspired. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Dana. Dana, I am so excited to have you with us today. Welcome to Makes You Wonder.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
I mean, we had a little fun conversation before this. I kind of, shocked you with the fact that we're doing video. You had a little incident yesterday with your daughter. Tell us about that. Share with us.
We're always constantly joking around and playing, and she just she's 7 years old, so she's really tiny, and she
Amazing.
It was really dark, and it was late at night. We were about to go to bed, and she just super smashed into my face to the point where I thought she maybe had broken my nose, because it was such a hard hit that the two of us are just holding each other crying. We're like both very injured by this smash in that we had. But I had that moment last night where I was like, well, as I'm icing my face, I'm like, it's a podcast tomorrow, so I won't have video, and if I wake up with a black eye, oh well, it's okay. It's just a podcast.
Well, you look great, and I'm happy you survived it with unscathed.
Everything's fine.
I've been there before. Sorry, I'm bringing that up because I've been there before too, sitting in a black eye somewhere and people asking questions. Where does this video podcast find you in the world? Where are you?
Yeah, so I am sitting in Salt Lake City, so Utah.
Amazing.
I've been here for a few years. The headquarters for The Void is here, and that's kind of how I ended up staying in Utah a bit longer than I was anticipating. I'm from LA. I've traveled and lived in many different parts of the world, and thought I would end up back in Los Angeles, but I've been in Utah for a bit now.
Well, we just heard about your very impressive background, and I look forward to dig into a lot of this with you, including spatial computing and AR and VR. But first, I kind of want to know, because you're on your resume, you've also been a video game designer and producer, and I consider myself a bit of a lifelong gamer at this point. So I'm very, very, very interested in that space. And as I just mentioned before, in the other room, my brother and my son is playing Fortnite. So if you hear screaming, that's really it. They're just playing games. But first, can you tell us about any of your favorite game that you produced or that you worked on that comes to mind for you as a favorite?
Stuff that I've made and created throughout the years that are like just some of my favorite games. I actually got to go experience my Transformers ride that I have at Dave & Buster's right now. It's been there for a few years. And I happened to be over there the other day because there was a person that came into town to kind of interview and do like a day in the life kind of series on me. And I told them I kind of had forgotten, but then also remember, I was like, oh yeah, I have this game at Dave & Buster's that's been out for a few years. We could stop by there and you can see it and you can play it and go see Dave & Buster's. And so we hopped over there, and it was fun to see some of the people who I've worked with throughout the years who've helped me, who are at the location. And I was able to jump back into it. I hadn't been in it in a couple years there. And I just had that moment again where I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot how much I love this game. It's a simulator. You're sitting in it. It's moving you around. It's a ride. It's a VR experience. You're with Optimus Prime. He's like holding you in his arms. And you're like right up in his face. And you're having this very like intimate moment with him. You get to pick your Autobot ally and go down this like storyline with them, and it's so fun, and it has all of the cast and the characters that you like know and love. And I just forgot that it was so impactful. You know, you step away from a project for a few years and you just kind of, you forget how much of yourself went into it. So when I went back, I was like, oh, I forgot how much I loved this piece. And then I remembered, hey, you haven't seen it in a couple years. Guess who else hasn't seen it in a couple years? That little girl who you forced to watch a lot of Transformers stuff with you, and now talks about Bumblebee and Optimus Prime and all these like, you know, characters. I was like, I need to take my daughter to go see it again because she saw it when she was 5 and now she's 7 and she remembers it still from back then, but she'll remember it even more so if I take her, you know, now. And so we went to go play it again and just had a really fun experience with each other. And then also like walked around, you know, Dave and Buster's and played a bunch of the other arcade games, and just to see her engage with the games and us play together. It just reminds me of how much I love that games give us an
Mm.
opportunity to share these like moments and create memories together
Mm.
and have fun together. And it's kind of silly. I mean, she's really good at Subway Surfers right now, and they
Yeah.
have a version of Subway Surfers like in Dave and Buster's, and I'm just like, yeah, baby, go win. It's just like rooting her on. But she, you know, she's really good at it. It's kind of silly to, in some ways, people would be like, oh, why do you get so excited about the fact that she's playing some like silly little game? But from my perspective, I'm like, no, she's like learned the mechanics, she understands the rules, she understands the power-ups, she like there's all these systems in there that she like understands and knows how to utilize them. And to me, like she knows how to dissect it all and explain it to me, and that's just as valuable as being able to like watch a film and dissect it or read a book and dissect it. It's a piece of art and an entertainment that she's studying and learning and can articulate back to me like why she likes certain parts of it. And that, I think that that's really cool.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I see that with my children. I have 2 kids, 9 and 12, and I've always gamed, and I always allowed them to play games quite early because that's how I grew up. Late '80s with a Nintendo 8-bit system, and then adventure games eventually on a home PC, and that's how I learned a lot of English. Actually,
Yes.
early
Yeah.
'90s, and problem solving and puzzles, and it's a very active way to entertain yourself. I always had that stance. I never really understood the flack that gaming could get sometimes. I mean, everything in moderation, but I think there's so many powerful things about it. So fun that you do that with your daughter as well. I go to arcades with my kids too whenever we were in Ohio just last week. My in-laws live out there on a big farm. We went to a place called Kings Island, and they have this arcade there, and it's
Fun.
so much fun. And you get to interact with things, and there's so much. What you reminded me of when you told that story is that there's a lot of nostalgia in games as well. I feel like a lot of
Mm-hmm.
games come back. And in your case, you kind of, you know, bring yourself back to those movie experiences that you have, and there's a certain relationship to games that you get to relive.
Mm-hmm.
So is it safe to say that you play a lot of games, or
Yeah.
just because you have to? Is that a requirement for your job? I mean, surely you have an interest in it, but
Yeah.
like, what is your relationship to games on a more of a personal level? Do you
Mm-hmm.
play every day? Is there a routine that you have around games?
I mean, it's funny because you know, sometimes I kind of have those moments where I'm like, oh, I'm not really playing anything right now. But the reality is I'm always playing something. Like there's always something on my phone that I'm playing. Like right now, I have this, it's kind of like a Tamagotchi, but it's like connected to goals that you put in. So you like assign your own goals to it, and then you can win some of these diamonds, and then you use the diamonds as part of your inventory system to like purchase things. And um and you assign the task, right? So you're like, okay, if I work out today, then I that's like one of my goals for the day. If I like, I think it comes like with some automatic ones, so it's like brushing your teeth and washing your face and stuff like that, which you would say like, okay, those are just like basic things, but for some people those are very important things if you're struggling with them, right? And so there's some mental health kind of aspects that kind of built into it as well. that I really appreciate. You also like today, one of the challenges was like, if you do a breathing exercise, you actually earn some diamonds, right? And I'm like, oh, well, a
Oh,
breathing
nice.
exercise would be great for me today. Like, so
Yeah.
it's like just these
Give me
very
those diamonds. Yeah.
yeah, and who doesn't like diamonds? But it's like
Yeah.
these subtle prompts, right, that help you engage and then think about maybe something that you didn't know you needed that day, but it's offering up an opportunity to engage
Mhm.
with its system, the community, but then also like personal enhancement. And so
Mhm.
there's some parts of the design there that I really um, admire, and I see why it's something that's kind of like integrated into my life.
Is it because I see that with creatives, my brothers in the film industry, and creatives in general, we're for that matter chefs. You know, it's hard to have a meal without really trying to look beyond and analyze all the ingredients. Is it hard to not? Is it hard to not do that when you play games? Meaning, like, look at all the details, or do you find yourself getting lost in games sometimes too? Are there good enough games that really kind of sweep you away and take you on a journey?
100%. I think that it's for me, it's always kind of been a balance too, because I did start in film as well and traditional stuff. And I think that that analytical critique kind of part of me is always there, right? Especially because like I've taught university courses where I'm like teaching people how to deconstruct everything that they just like saw and witnessed or participated in. So it's like always there, but I do try to make myself turn it off so that I can just consume it the way a consumer would try to take it in. It's really hard to do that sometimes, and I find myself like if something has some bits and pieces that are not like finessed, that it's harder to turn that part of me off because I'm like, I can see all of the parts that like need a little bit of extra help, right? But if something is really well executed, then it's easier for me to just lose myself in the piece or in the environment, in the game, whatever it is. But then it's funny too, because I'll lose myself for a while, and then eventually I come back to being like, oh my gosh, this is so good. Why is it so good? And then I have to like analyze it again and kind of like break it apart again and be like, this is why it's good. It's because this part of the inventory system feeds into this part of the socialization system, which feeds into this part of the like character development system. And this is like, I'm just like, now I understand why it all is so cool. Like, because it all works so well together. But yeah.
Amazing. Are there any specific games that you? I mean, if you would say any favorite games of all time, I'm sure you have a few. But what do you think are like
Yeah.
outstanding experiences, maybe in the past and maybe something now contemporary that kind of has blown you away?
Yeah, I think like as a child, the most favorite game of all time really was Street Fighter 2. That was like the
Oh,
game that
nice.
got me like super hooked, and then I super fell in love with Chun-Li. I'm like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
I love her. I want to be her. I'm gonna dress up like her for Halloween, like the whole bit, right? I was just like so into her as a character and a person, and also like playing the game, like you get to like go to these different environments, and it made me kind of really get excited about wanting to like travel and stuff like that, even though they're, I don't know if they're all like real places, but it's just you start to feel like you want to go see the world because of what you're being exposed to. um and I think yeah, that's probably like the main like childhood game that I think really was like the most influential on me, and understanding the different characters and their strengths and abilities and all that kind of stuff was a
Mm,
lot of fun. um and then like more recently, I have, especially with VR, really kind of dove into
mm,
more of the immersive gaming systems. And so Moss was like the main game that really
mm,
got me hooked into VR. I was like, oh my
mm,
gosh, this is amazing. I thought Moss was just adorable. The little character Quill is just this cute little mouse, who you go on this adventure with, and just adorable, like theming and the storyline and the mechanics all like really worked well with each other for me. I really enjoyed that game. And then they came out with Moss 2, and it just like added to that enhancement of the story and the characters and the mechanics added upon themselves too. And so I thought that was very well designed and crafted as a VR game. And then, of course, like a lot of the stuff that we've made at the Void for location-based VR
Mm-hmm.
experiences, and I think that we've done a really good job of building upon these worlds and bringing people in and making them feel like they're a part of the story, that they are the hero in this story, and allowing people those types of emotional connections, I think,
Mm-hmm.
has been something that we really excelled at. And then also the stuff that I'm doing at Around right now, I play a lot of mobile games that have some type of like social component to them, or something that's like trying to build community. And something that one of the games I really loved before I started at Around is Sky, Children of the Light.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful game, and it has a lot of very deep story lore that kind of goes on this path and this journey of adolescence, like childhood, adolescence, and growing into an adult. And there's all these like themings about just kind of like experiences and struggles that you have to overcome throughout your life. And so it's a beautiful game. Like the way it's structured is really beautiful, and the social interactions and the community building that it has within it too, I think, is really well done for a casual MMO.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like pieces and parts of that type of influence that I definitely have brought into how I design some of the content that we're building and creating at Around as well. Like it's been an influential kind of aspect too. So, and Animal Crossing for me during the pandemic was like a lifesaver. That and Horizons, those two were like my lifesavers. I feel like during the pandemic, because it really had the community and the emotional connection that
Mm-hmm.
I needed for specifically for that point of time in my life. Like I really needed it, and it was there, and I'm so grateful to them for having built them.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I can be a place of to find some comfort or peace or found an emotional connection to a virtual world. I think that's a beautiful part about games. Many times. But how did you get where you are now? You started out in the creative field in a more traditional sense, and you're very accomplished creative in quite a new field now as well. So can you back up a little? Share us your journey into the creative field and your kind of road into AR and VR and this new kind of spatial computing space that we're entering. At least I think so. We're entering that in a little bigger way. It's quite an early market and form factor, I guess, for mainstream use. But yeah, tell us about how you got started. How do you get where you are?
Yeah, when I kind of take a step back and I look at like all the different experiences I've had throughout the years, professionally, creatively, they all kind of just build upon each other in this very unknown way. I couldn't have foreseen all of this per se, but it's funny how like very, very early on as an artist, as a creative, using technology to create my art, I always felt like there was something missing, which is interesting. So I'll expand upon like how that came to be eventually, where I found the thing that was missing. Um, but when I first kind of started, I remember, I was 15, really little, had my first camera and started shooting. I started shooting photography for different bands and entering different competitions and really understanding like storytelling from a visual standpoint. So nothing to do with, with sound per se or motion, like scrap all that other stuff out of the way. It was just, how do I compose a photograph, and how do I tell a story in one image that really captures everything? And this is back on film, right? This is like pre-digital. So it wasn't really using the computer to composite stuff yet, to create those worlds. So I was like learning that way. And then eventually it built into diving into digital. Digital became a thing. Photoshop was really out there now. I could afford a computer that could run it. I could like shoot with a camera that had, you know, digital formatting. And now I'm starting to like really build the worlds with not having to worry about like the cost of a set design or props. Like I could bring in whatever I wanted now, right? And it's like, okay, now I get to compose and composite all of these pieces together and make these very like surreal looking photographs with people and environments that were like larger than life, and they were like little or something that was just kind of odd, you know, like very surreal kind of pieces. And that was really exciting because it got me to like think outside the box of like, okay, now the world is my oyster. What can I do with it? And then eventually like that led into going to UCLA and being in the film department there and being able to take classes and really dabble into like, okay, now I'm going to add motion and sound to everything I'm doing and start to figure this out from that perspective. And that eventually like moved into like museum pieces where it was more installation pieces. So now I'm like, how do we create an experience for someone to live and participate in? And so live performance became part of that too. Like, how do I ask someone to become a participant in this physical space with the digital content as the guide to help initiate that kind of response and get them involved? And then that turned into like, now I want to start playing with sensors. How do I play with sensors and involve this like actual input where something is listening for a participant and then reacting to that participant, right? So like now I've got sensors involved, which if you break it down, it's like that's the beginnings of game development for me, right? Like that's me figuring out how do I work with a system where it's calling, listening, and reacting to each other. And so then that eventually moves into just like working in all of these spaces and bringing all of these components together, using immersive sound design as part of that, you know, using all of these different like, yeah, like really building upon itself, right? Props became a part of that too. So like designing all of these very like physical kind of interactions that I wanted people to do. And then eventually I put on my first VR headset.
When was that?
Yeah,
Do you remember?
Oh geez, at least 10 years ago at this point now. It's probably almost what, 11 or 12. I don't know. Yeah, something like that. It's been a while.
Do you remember which one it was? Was it an Oculus? Or
yeah, it was a DK1. Like it was the very, very first, you know, version of what we now consider the consumer level VR systems. So it was running on a PC, and it was at Sundance. It was the first year that they had VR at the festival. And that for me, because leading up to that point, I had like used cameras in immersive ways and phones in immersive ways. And I had done like traditional storytelling through like film and photography and all these installation pieces. But like something was still missing for me. Like I never really ever wanted to join any of the unions when I was in LA, because I was like, no, I don't, this isn't it. Like, this isn't the thing yet. You know, like I don't want to be a part of this union because this is not the thing yet. Something's still missing for me. And so I constantly had this like feeling like there was something else out there that was, I'll know it when I see it, was always kind of like the way I felt towards it. And until I see it, I'm just going to keep growing my skills of storytelling, visual storytelling, how people interact with the user experiences, all that kind of stuff. I'm just going to keep growing these other pieces of things until it finally clicks someday, right? And try to make a living at the same time. So like try to survive and make a living as a working artist while I'm trying to learn all these other pieces. I mean, at one point I was like flying drones for a living, building them for a living. Like I was all over the place. Yeah. I'm like, I'm going to use this other new technology to see what it does to help me kind of like tell a story visually, right? Like I've always kind of been the tinkerer and want to tap into the new tech and see what it can do for me to help. It's like, it's another tool, right? It's the way I've always seen it. And so, yeah, the Sundance was just one of those magical moments where I was like, oh, this is it. This is the thing. This is the thing I've been waiting for, is this like very immersive apparatus that I can now do embodiment with, and I can really have people be a part of this visual experience, right? And so that really shifted things for me. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go get 2 master's degrees. And one of them was in game development specifically. Um, it's an engineering program and game design and everything that I needed it to be, it offered me. I didn't really touch much VR, but I was like, that's okay. I'll figure out all the principles so I can just apply it into the way I need it to work for me. And then I got a master's degree in film and new media and really focused in on the new media aspect of it so that I could lean into some more of the immersive and emerging technologies and stuff. And got lots of support to do that, and was eventually able to like design a class to do immersive media and teach that class with a bunch of students. And I was working at the Void by this point already, and developing a bunch of stuff there. And those students were very lucky because I just had them all sign NDAs, and then I would take them to the Void and they got to see like stuff in pre-production and production and all the different phases of prototypes, and they got to like see the behind the curtains. So it was really fun.
That's an incredible. I mean, a class where you sign an NDA. That's a good class. You know you're gonna go on a ride. That's great.
I was like, as long as you sign this NDA, I promise you it'll be worth it. And it was a lot of fun.
I mean, it sounds like you had what an incredible journey, and I love the part about you searching for that moment. You knew there was something out there that you haven't really encountered yet. That was a bit of a calling, and then at Sundance you saw it. Do you remember what experience you had first in the VR headset? Was it I remember a roller coaster was the first time I tried it out at the Spotify office. It was probably also 10, 11 years ago. Yeah. Do you remember what you saw?
Yeah. So Noni made this piece, and it was not a full 360 piece. It was only a 180 film, and it's a really heavy subject, but it basically is a girl who is raped. It is a very heavy piece. It's a very, very, very heavy piece, but there is something about that being in that intimate space with this story, and like you're seeing it from her perspective, so you're kind of like waking up at like feeling like something that just happened to you, right? And so you're embodying her perspective. And it was so impactful for me just to live through that experience of seeing how this like medium could really make you feel empathetic. And some people question, is it an empathy machine? It's been called an empathy machine. Like, is it an empathy machine? Is it a sympathy machine? I don't know. Like, I don't know what to call it per se, because it's got, no one's going to know really what the effects of something like that is long lasting unless you've been through it. And if you are someone who has been through it, then this is a very triggering potential event for you to experience. But I think that there's so much depth to what can be shown and shared and then discussed. And there's another piece that Stanford Labs did about becoming homeless. And that piece in particular, like they did research with the piece. They had a petition for equitable housing, and people who went through the VR experience and then came out of it were more likely to sign the petition than the people who hadn't done the VR experience. Right. So it's like we have hard evidence and research that shows that people have an actual emotional connection and reaction to these pieces when they're exposed to them. So it's all about how we design and curate and really like develop these opportunities for people to have an empathetic experience that I think is the most interesting part of the technology from kind of the humane side of it, right? Because I think that like the game development aspects of it, and like obviously like gaming as an industry really can help push technology forward and can really help like lean into different aspects of VR, AR. But then there's these other components too that I think that can go deeper than just entertainment and really tap into that emotional connection and community building, which is part of the stuff that I'm really curious about as well.
Yeah, it makes me think of how two worlds feel like they are merging slowly but very surely, and that is the kind of the gaming industry, who is which is evolving at a very fast clip, and the traditional, call it movie or film storytelling. They're coming together. So I mean, you see it a mile away, but it's a slow moving piece, and I'm excited for the future for just that reason. Because just as film can transport you into different worlds, and storytelling, which can be very, very immersive, even though it's on the silver screen in a movie theater. Um, the amplification of that in a VR environment where you're completely immersed, and your brain almost doesn't can distinguish where it is, and it's a promise for the future that it's quite powerful, and it's obviously an opportunity that is just a blank canvas of opportunity there, really, to create such powerful experiences, not only for entertainment but also for the reasons that you or for the scenarios that you described. I also think about I know Charity Water has done similar things with VR for fundraising, and I know that was very successful too. And again, it's all about getting you into the shoes of other people and seeing literally a new perspective on problems and life situations. So that's super powerful. Okay, so you found this as your calling. You work at the Void, and you are also a teacher. Like, did you have time for anything else? Where do you draw inspiration from for your work? It feels like you are very
Yeah.
energetic about exploring everything, not only game design and maybe the coding aspect of it, but actual physical objects and the kind of building the machinery around it, as well as the development.
I think I really try to take advantage of all the different types of art forms and opportunities that are out there. So for myself, it's like participating in festivals, going to conferences, engaging in the new type of activations that are out there, getting to sample different types of games, downloading stuff on my phone that's just recently released, getting stuff on the Switch or on my PS5. Like, it's just trying to consume content that is in the spaces that obviously for me are interesting and fun, but then also like experiencing things that like kind of come into town. So here in Utah, we just had this like circus come into town, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna go to the circus. Like my friend's like, hey, I got us some free tickets because I shared the link. It was like, would you want to go to something like that? And she's like, actually, I have free tickets to that. And I'm like, well, we're going, right? Like, that means we're going.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure
so
we're
we
going. That
went,
sounds
and
great. Yeah.
yeah, and the nice thing too is like, that friend in particular also is a game developer, and so she and I are there sitting there, and we're like looking at the whole experience and able to like talk through different pieces and parts, right? And like,
Mm-hmm.
I've studied some magic before. One of my boss, my old boss at the Void, and Curtis Hickman, he was the co-founder of the Void.
Mm-hmm.
He is a magician, and so I actually like studied magic theory. And so when I was sitting there in
Of
the
course you did.
circus,
Of course you did.
I know, right? I'm like, study some magic. I'm like, able to pick apart all of the different pieces that they're using as like redirection tools, and like how they're engaging the audience and audience participation, and how they're like bringing the theater parts of it to life, and the storytelling, and how everything's like unfolding. And it was just fun to like sit there with a friend who like isn't going to be annoyed by the fact that I'm doing this with her, and is actually engaged in it too. And we're talking through all the different parts. And then like, I've studied like the ASTM standards for theme parks and safety regulations for like carnivals.
Oh
And
wow.
so then I'm like, oh, how did they set up like, the tightrope? Like, like, how is that like being like inserted into this space? And like, how are people engaging with these physical objects as performers? And how is everything being directed? And how are the actors moving through the stage and stuff like that? So it's even like going to something like a circus for me. I'm like, oh, okay, like, let's take it apart and like see what's going on here, but and then it leads into, okay, how am I going to, because when I make stuff out around and I'm looking at the actual stadium, the stadium is my theater space, right? Like this is my theater space, and the field is the actual stage, and I'm building for theater and around is how I
Right.
think of it, right? And a circus is theater in the round too. You've got all these like different spaces that people are moving around, and they're engaging the different spaces around the scene and up in the air. Like they're doing stuff up in the sky, which is also the space I get to play with in augmented reality as well. So like depth and scale and how things are really kind of engaging and moving within that space and utilizing that space are all bits and pieces that can help like inform how I might design a digital character or a digital celebration or moment, and how people can engage with each other from across a stage in a digital space, right? And so really thinking about the merging of the physical and the digital, and using the phone as the apparatus to help us connect with each other and build these like digital worlds, so that I can make my circus essentially. It's kind of, the way I see it.
We're all working in a circus at some point,
Yeah, yeah, why not?
in some ways. But let's talk about around then, because I mean, I met you in Cannes and with your co-founder or with your founder Josh as well, which was fantastic. And saw the experience firsthand, and I think Josh and I, we were in a panel kind of discussion about the future of fan experiences and AI and kind of the digital progress in that space. But first, maybe you want to share what around is in your words, and what the concept is.
Yeah, 100%. So we make augmented reality for stadiums, live events. We think about fan engagement and how we can really utilize augmented reality to draw people further into not just the game, but then also how do we connect them with each other so that fans really feel like they're part of a community and they're building upon a community. So we see the phone as like almost becoming our game controller so that we can engage with each other in a more kind of interactive and deeper way. So we've built these like systems for people to really kind of grow and develop their own avatar and their own systems within their own profile within that system, so that they're constantly feeling engaged and have a reason to come back. And then I think about it also as like we build real life loot boxes. So there's a digital loot box that we can participate in the augmented space, but I'm actually able to give you a real life reward, right? You can actually collect something, yeah, from that digital gift box, that loot box, and take that and redeem it for something in the stadium right then and there. So you're getting the real life reward almost like either immediately or almost immediately, or I can actually have you go to a place to go redeem the thing, either whether it's like an entrance into a different entertainment space or it's an actual item at a store. Like you can go get that real life reward. So again, really kind of merging this physical and digital world with each other in a deeper way that hasn't really been seen before. So they're really leaning into this kind of MMO kind of mentality again of how do we like build community within these spaces. And we've had some amazing partners throughout the years, both in baseball, in soccer. We're launching this week with the soccer team, Minnesota United. We've done things with the
Oh,
Rams in the
awesome.
past.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. We've done things with the Rams in the past, and we're doing things with the Rams this next season that I'm so excited to reveal to the world, because it's gonna be so new and fun, and just really blending that like real world engagement and gift box idea together. Like it's gonna be so cool. I'm so excited for it. There's just like a lot of things that we're building upon, right? And it's been fun to do it with these partners, especially in these stadium settings. They're also like they're very safe settings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some of the augmented reality experiences that have been out there in the past, and something that kind of made me a little bit cautious about wanting to move into this space was just like the safety concerns around the
Mm-hmm.
space. Like we're accessing your camera, we're
Mm.
asking you to like physically move into different locations. Are they safe
Right.
locations, or do a physical activity that like we don't know if we can keep you safe? And people shouldn't have been driving. They didn't want you driving while you were playing Pokemon Go, but many people did, right? Like, so it's
Right.
just like,
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. There was
yeah,
reporting. Yeah, I remember that.
exactly. So when I was thinking about moving into space, I was a little bit kind of nervous about what that meant, right? And like, how do you keep people safe was always my question, and it definitely
Mm.
was a question that I always was developing and designing for at the Void. Is how do I keep you safe within this virtual world? Because I
Mm.
am blindfolding you
Right.
and you are walking around a space, a physical space with props and all sorts of things in that space. And like, how do I keep you safe was always like one of my design concerns and questions.
Mm.
It's the same stuff that I brought over into this AR world, right? Like, how do I keep you
Mm.
safe on the physical, on the digital, on giving me access to your camera, right? Like all of those
Mm.
components and pieces for me are really important as far as like ethics are concerned. And so,
Mm.
yeah, we've been able to really develop something that's fun and engaging. And it's been a few iterations of the product from having no game design kind of backbones to it to being this like standalone app, which had lots of
Mm.
friction, to now where we are today, which has a lot of different design philosophies included in it.
Super interesting. And I can imagine you can partner with teams and brands to get these experiences to come alive in many different ways in the future too. But I mean, you're onto kind of the future of all of this. It feels like we talked about traditional gaming, movie story, film storytelling, and AR and VR. It feels like there's a lot of things happening now in the market in general in these areas. And the past couple of years, we've seen a lot of hype, I guess, around the notion of a metaverse and how we can interact with virtual worlds in different ways, which isn't a new idea, but it's just coming back again and getting new, I guess, new traction with new great technology, right? And how that's evolving. Spatial computing, I guess, made popular in the mainstream, I guess, in the near, recently with Apple getting into that. But all of this is getting kind of mixed reviews in the mainstream. I personally think that spatial computing is we haven't seen much of it yet, and I think there's a lot of excitement around that for many different use cases, not only entertainment. But what is your take on the future of all of this? I mean, you're working in AR now in this circus and the theater experience. But yeah, I would love to pick your brain on what you think is the future of all of this with movies and franchises branching into so many different realms here for entertainment purposes. What excites you about the future and all of this?
I'm really hopeful that we will get a device that feels a little bit more like it's integrated into our everyday lives. So just like how we use our smartphone for probably the mass majority of any type of technological interface that we're kind of dealing with in a day, I can see us having some type of wearable, and to me, like that could be glasses, right? That we put on our face and it helps just enhance the reality that we're already participating in, and it can access this other digital content that just only helps us with maybe like day-to-day tasks, whether that's like I'm constantly looking at my phone for recipes when I'm cooking. I'm constantly looking at my phone when my daughter's asking me about some random thing and I don't know like how's honey made. I'm like, oh, I think I know how honey's made, but like let me double check. Hey Siri, like is it the spit? Like it is, right? Like I need to be fact checked here before I like start spouting off like facts to my child about things that
Yeah.
I LA girl just know nothing about, right? I'm just like, oh, let me double check that for you real quick. Hold on. And so it's just like even those like little moments of wanting to have technology assist me in a conversation or my day-to-day life. I see a wearable being something that will help with that. And then also walking down the street and running into like somebody that I know, or I might be connected with them at a conference, but I'm like, ugh, I don't know. I don't remember their name or what company they're with today. Are they still at the same company? Like all of those like things that you would have on a business card or a LinkedIn profile. Like, could I access that immediately and get all the information? Like, download the information like in real time so that I can have an educated conversation that's applicable and relevant, as opposed to like, how are you doing? What are you doing these days? Like, I could just get to like the stuff that is really fascinating for both of us to want to like dive deeper into, right, in a conversation. I think all of those types of things would be really helpful. But it's just, I feel like technology has this opportunity to like seamlessly integrate into our lives, and we just haven't really like fully tapped into that ecosystem quite yet. I think Apple's done a great job of adding on the headset. Like, now we've got this wearable that can connect to our all our other devices that are within the Apple ecosystem. I'm just really looking forward to like making it more accessible. Even that headset, like for me, like I can't wear it for very long without it hurting, right? And so just things like that, like making things a little bit more accessible for everyone to use. But that's part of the limitations of the hardware too, right? And so we'll see that evolve with time. The neuro interfaces that we've talked about, waiting to see those kind of pop into the mainstream, and how do we use them, and how are they going to help and enhance our lives too, is another question. But then also like thinking about like AI and like personalized content, right? For as a content creator, I'm like, ooh, I can like tap into like your player fantasies in a whole new way. Like, yeah, and I can offer you the tools so that we can help each other give you the best experience that you could ever imagine. And that's because the tools of generative AI can actually help assist with that, and I don't need to have this like massive art team. It kind of levels that playing field a little bit more for people to like engage and create content that people can connect to,
Mm.
um, because it's more personalized to them, right, into their interest. and
Hmm.
and those are the types of things that I'm interested in, and then the merging of all those things together, I'm like, ooh, this is going to be so cool. Once they like all come together in this very like built upon additive way, right? Like when
Hmm.
we can get there. And I know like Meta has their Ray Bans that now have the AI
Hmm.
built into it, and that in itself is like one more step closer to some of those realities and those dreams that I hope we can all eventually get to.
I agree with all of that. I wish I have that a lot. I find myself in conferences doing little awkward laps to check out LinkedIn profiles because I need to remind myself who people are. Been there so many times. It's crazy. If I can only have that on my contact lenses, it would be great.
I know, right?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. One thing that I think is extremely interesting in the world of gaming and with AI, obviously lending itself to a lot of ideas in that space. But what blew me away this is a couple of months ago. I'm sure you saw the same thing. This idea of AI powered NPCs, non-playable characters in games, in open world games, and just that the notion of that, you jump to a conclusion where, of course, there's going to be open world games that are infinite again, with characters that have endless kind of depth to them and stories, and so it becomes this ultra personalized experience for any gamer to step into. Uh, and it sounds amazing, but also a little bit, this is stepping into the matrix. Are we, when we're old, Dana, are we going to plug in and just be in different virtual worlds? What do you think the future holds for us when we're 90 years old?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we're still engaging in these like real life experiences too, right? And that's why for me like the physical aspects of it, the connection points of what we can how we can use the digital to enhance the real, I think is the part that I hope that we like never lose sight of, right? And so that it's not me just like sitting, I mean, like I said, Horizons and Animal Crossing during COVID, like lifesavers, like they really helped me feel connected to people, to actual people who sent me little gifts on my birthday, and little NPCs who celebrated my birthday, right, with me in Animal Crossing. Like
Yeah.
all of these like moments that I had with these digital characters were really special and sweet, but also like these moments that I had with real people in the virtual settings of Horizons are lasting relationships. Like I still talk to these people. We did an Apple Vision Pro dev camp just a few months ago, and I was a mentor for that dev camp, and I think we were like the second day into the dev camp when somebody said something about Horizons, and I was like, oh yeah, I was there like a whole 10. And then they're like, oh, did you know that he also was in it too? Like, have you guys talked? And I'm like, oh, hey, what was your like username? And he told me, and I'm like, wait a minute, we know each other. And he's like, yeah, I remember your world. And he was like so specific about my world because he had been in it, right? And
Right.
then it was already like we just went from like surface level conversation to like wow, super deep into these like very intense, meaningful conversations about like what we had experienced and what we like felt and like who we are. Like we already like had all these connections. He knew about my family and my grandma and my grandparents and my history, my culture, because I had designed this world that had all of that content in there, right? And so this digital space that we met in became the means for us to have this very deep
Mhm.
real life connection once we actually realized who each other were in the real world, right? And it's moments like that where you're like, the digital enhanced the real, and our level of connection is so much more meaningful now that we've had that experience together. And I think those are the types of things that I appreciate about these spaces. And when I'm an old lady and my physical abilities aren't there and I can't go climb the mountain that I want to climb or travel to the country that I want to travel to, I find some type of like solace in knowing that a bunch of my friends or soon to be friends or future friends can be found in these digital spaces, and that my physical ailments actually won't become a problem for me to continue to engage my mind and connect with other people. And so I'm excited about what these technologies offer us for future purposes. I mean, because that's the stuff that's happening today, right? There's all these communities within these digital spaces of like deaf people who get to connect with each other and have friends around the world who are experiencing the same things that they're experiencing, and they have a community in there. And that's the type of stuff that I think is just really beautiful, that we forget that these technologies allow us to do. um and so yeah, I get excited about all of those bits and pieces to be able to like not not take me away from the world that I'm currently in, but help me live it even deeper.
Yeah, and of course we have Neuralink, which is making breaking new ground in how you can operate games. I don't know if you've seen it playing Civilization on a flight. The person there that's testing that out for them, I forget his name now, but a brave soul breaking new grounds in super exciting ways. I'm so excited to hear that you're extremely passionate about all these areas in you're true creative. And a lot of creatives that I speak to, I don't really call myself a creative, but we all create it at certain parts of our careers. And what I do is entitled mostly to writing and branding and building companies. Um, but a lot of creators I speak to share the same kind of story of how, kind of the same as famous authors do as well, or artists, that creating is not really about being motivated and striking when the inspiration hits you, but rather about the discipline of being creative. I have this one of my favorite quotes from Pablo Picasso. It's like this: inspiration exists, but it has to find you working or something like that. I might be
Mm.
paraphrasing that, but it feels like you're just bursting with energy and creative energy in a lot of ways. And you turn to games and explore that area to be inspired. But do you ever get stuck? Do you ever get like creative blocks?
Oh yeah.
You're human after all. That's good to hear. That's good to hear.
Yeah, 100%. All the time. I mean, I feel like, especially when I'm trying to challenge myself and say, like, what's something we haven't seen before?
Mm.
It's really hard, right? When you're like trying to
Yeah.
invent the future. It's like,
Yeah.
I love how people are always like, well, go to Chat GPT and they'll give you the answer. And I'm like, well, Chat GPT is built off of past information.
Right.
And I'm trying to figure out the stuff that it can't even think about yet, kind of stuff.
That's it.
And but sometimes, I'm like, oh, it's nice to start talking to a GPT so that you can get some of those creative juices flowing and thinking about things potentially in a different way, right? So I think that a lot of these like different tools and things can help us get out of those runs that we get into. But also it's like, I mean, my team members are those people for me too, right? It's sometimes us just jumping onto a call and talking about like what's going on in our lives and the problems that we're just facing on like a humane way, like can help spark a moment of us having that collaborative flow again. And it gets us into this place where we feel safe to like think about things and explore with each other. And so I think it's like everyone gets into these like spots where they're stuck and they feel just like an imposter or something. I go through those imposter moments all the time too. But then like being surrounded by people who can help inspire me, or even just going out to the mountains and having a walk, or playing with my dog, like just any little thing that can like break up what I'm experiencing or feeling, or the breathing exercises or yoga, whatever those like personal kind of care things are that I need to do for myself, allow me to like take a moment to breathe and know that it's going to come, it'll come back and it'll be there. And sometimes you're working on a project or have a client where you just feel like, oh my gosh, this is not working. Like it's just not clicking, and what is going on here. But always like taking that moment to just kind of have that internal reflection of appreciation of where you are and what you're doing, and what you've done. And sometimes I can just help push you to that next spot where you can start to now think about what you want to do. What are the things you've been wanting to do, and how can you implement that into the current project that you have, kind of thing.
That's solid advice. And it's good to hear that even someone like you gets stuck in creative um, one-way streets sometimes,
Oh yeah.
like everyone else, and that imposter syndrome, that inner voice that sometimes criticizes you worse than anyone else in the real world. Um, all right, we're running out of time here because I'm having so much fun listening to all your stories. I do wanted to talk about your co-chair for Women in Games, which is an initiative from that you've been involved with for quite some time, as I understand it, with the Game Developers Association. What are some of the initiatives there that you're most passionate about, that is helping women in tech and in gaming? What do you do, and what are you passionate about?
Yeah, so I have been the Women in Game chair for a few years now, but we actually kind of have changed and have shook up the whole entire organization a bit. And so now I am the chair, and
Okay,
yeah, this is a
amazing!
new development.
Congratulations,
Thank
chairwoman.
you, thank you.
Yeah.
This is a new development as of this last like GDC. So it's been just a few months now that things have kind of changed, and it's it's been a few months where I have started to gather together a board, some really amazing women who are very, very women and individuals who identify as female identifying. So we are really coming together to re-envision, like, what does this next phase of this organization look like? How can we be more inclusive? How can we really build initiatives to not just educate people about where games have been, but how do we empower developers so that they feel like they can actually go into the room and have a voice? How do we prep them so that when they get the opportunity to sit at the table, they feel empowered to be there, and that imposter syndrome isn't the thing that holds them back from being able to succeed? So, like, how do we start to provide resources and opportunities for people to really feel like they can seize that moment when it comes? Because this last GDC, we ran a roundtable discussion, and the industry's been going through a lot of shakeups recently. There's been lots of layoffs, just a horrible amount of layoffs, and studios closing, and just lot of stuff going on in the games industry. And something that became very noteworthy within that roundtable discussion was that there were lots of women or female identifying individuals sitting in the room who had been laid off and had said that everyone on their team who was a woman was laid off.
Oh.
Yeah, all the women on the team were laid off. And this was like a multiple studio pattern that I was hearing in this one discussion. With a very, this is a small population of people like in this room. It's not like a fair assessment of the entire industry, but just that small group of people, it was a similar story at multiple studios. That was just the women let go. And it just reminds me again that, like, we talk about inclusion and equality and equity, but when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, like, women are still facing some challenges that we don't talk about. And this is one of them, that all of the women were let go, is just completely heartbreaking to hear. And so how do we make sure that people understand that, like, the women on the team are just as important and have just as much to offer, if not more sometimes, right? And like, how do we make sure that, like, what are the metrics that are being used to identify who you keep and who you let go, and those internal biases that sometimes managers or hiring managers or producers or production teams might have that they don't recognize. Like, all of that type of education is part of what we hope to really kind of like lean into and start to uncover. But then also, like I said, giving people tools so that they feel empowered if this does happen, how to not feel kind of hopeless in those situations. Because it's kind of a dark GDC in some ways this year, just because so many people had been laid off. So a lot of very similar, like, stories about needing to find that next opportunity, not being able to make rent. Like, what are they going to do? Their visas are about to expire. Like, all of these things that are very real for the industry, but even more so, like, when you break down into these individual groups, like women in games, and how it affects that population in particular. Yeah, it's been hard. So we are trying to come up with new initiatives within the organization. We're going through some, like, re-identity kind of stuff as well, just to make sure that we're really servicing the community in a larger sense.
Do you find that this has changed over? It feels like gaming, if we just talk about that industry for a while, has been quite male dominant. I mean, just growing up, it was all about men in games as well. It was very focused on that kind of stereotypical male hero. Some fighting games, there were obviously female characters, but predominantly quite male dominant. And I just see on the gaming side, which is I find encouraging, just from my vantage point, not knowing the industry that well, but just playing games with my kids and seeing that my son, he doesn't care if it's a female or male Fortnite character. He just loves the skin. He loves to change it out. He is just as much playing with, I feel like that felt very, very, very positive, as a positive change in terms of where gaming has been before. But in terms of who steps into the gaming industry, are there more women interested in coming into games now? I mean, is there a positive change there? There's a lot of female streamers out there as well. They're wildly popular. It feels like there's a good movement behind female gamers, and characters, but also women coming into the industry to make a difference.
Yeah, so I think there's like two parts to kind of what you're saying. Like, yes, 100% there are like more female characters, right? And they've been like fairly represented more recently than they had been in the past. So in the past, we had a lot of like over sexualization of the female characters, like the female leads, the Laura Crofts, right, who were like
of course,
super sexualized, but they were leads. But they had to fit into a certain type of motif, right, in order to be accepted into the games. So we were definitely seeing an enhancement of equality when it comes to that, and also like the balanced characters. Sometimes the female characters weren't as powerful as the male characters, so like who's going to play the female character if you're always going to lose, right? Like, so making it equal, making it balanced, like the game design of these characters has definitely changed throughout the years as well. But the flip side of also of what you're saying too is there are lots of students coming out and graduating from these like game design degrees. Tons of women are coming into the field, right? Lots of women who play games, make games, lots of different types of skill sets, from engineers, artists, producers, all across the industry of skill sets, right? Especially, lots of narrative designers and everything. But what ends up happening, and some of the data that we've seen, is that they can't get past that 5-year, 7-year kind of mark. And sometimes it's even lower than that, depending on the field. Like, they can't get past that entry mid-level mark. So we're not seeing a bunch of females who can actually sustain to get to a place where they're becoming the execs, they're becoming the senior leaders, they're the ones who are the hiring managers. That's the problem. They're coming in, but we're not retaining them. And that example that I gave of like, oh, all of the women on the team were let go. Well, how does that fit back into this narrative of the stats actually showing us that the women can only hit a certain level or time frame in the industry, and then all of a sudden they have to like drop out, or they have to switch to something else, right? What are we doing to prevent them from being nurtured and continuing into these senior leadership roles is kind of the question. And so, yeah, there's lots of research that needs to still be done to try to figure out like, where is this inequity coming from, and how do we really support companies and teams to help nurture those individuals so that we don't lose them in this path that they're on. How do we rally around them and become, their party that can help get them through this level, so that they can actually achieve the next the next part of their career. And I think that's part of some of the problems that we're seeing, because if you're not having very many women in the role of a hiring manager, then there's, again, some of those internal biases that can potentially come up more regularly too. So I don't know, there's lots of questions and things that need to kind of be sorted through.
Yeah, for sure. And it feels like it's closer related to the general tech industry, I guess, in many ways. It's gaming part of it. Dana, I've completely ran over time here with you. I hope you're okay with that.
Yeah.
But we are going to round it out now. I thank you so much for joining. I do want to ask you on while we're on that same subject, really. I mean, you have had you're in such an amazing career. I've see that you're an extremely curious person and how you found your calling and your career path and very passionate about what you do. So what advice would you give aspiring creatives looking to break into the fields of what you're in right now, and especially women then, or minorities? Yeah, what would you recommend them if they're now in college and looking to get into the gaming industry and technology?
I think my first word of advice would be, if you have this idea and everyone around you thinks that you're just absolutely crazy, because it's never been done before, they don't know very much about it, like, don't listen to don't listen to the naysayers. Like, just go out and try to make the stuff that you want to make, right? Go and experiment, find a community of people who are doing the things that you want to do, like-minded individuals. There's so many organizations that are out there who meet in person, who meet virtually around the world, right? And so find that community, find those people to build with. Like, for example, like this Apple Vision Dev Pro camp that we did, and we had people from all over the world who were able to either
Wow.
physically or virtually participate in some fashion, right? And so it's really like looking for those opportunities, trying to like get over some of that imposter syndrome. Even if you don't know how to code, everyone thinks like you have to know how to code in order to be in this space. It's like, no, you don't have to know how to code to be in this space. There's so many different skill sets that are used. I mean, like I said, my old boss is like, was a magician, right? Like he started off as a magician. Like, there are so many people who have so many different skill sets to bring to the table, who just enhance these experiences in a way that like you can't even imagine, because you wouldn't have thought about it from their perspective. And so don't be afraid to really lean into something that you don't know,
Mm.
and try to learn as much as you possibly can, and be the person who defines the standards in the space that's not defined yet, is always something that I encourage people to try to do.
Amazing. Beautiful, beautiful advice. Thank you so much. And I have one final question for you. On the lighter side here, what is a book that you're gifting or a podcast that you're recommending that you want to share with us today? Or maybe it's
Oh my
music.
gosh.
We
Yeah,
already
that's a
talked about games. I'm sure that's top of mind. But is there any other piece of media that you can
let me think about this.
recommend to us today?
Yeah, so okay, so some of the podcasts that my friends have been recommending to me that I have started, but I really, there's so many episodes and I have to like lean into them more. And of course, like I'm like, oh, I'm gonna start with the Walt Disney one. So I just
Okay.
love Disney so much. It's called Founders. Like that is a podcast that I've started to listen to, that has been really interesting, because it, it's just exploring these like people who have done some pretty amazing things. And typically the person who is giving the podcast like has read the biographies of these individuals and like knows a lot of their history, and maybe has read biographies of other people and can connect some of these dots of like common traits and things like that between people. So I do feel like that's been like a really awesome book, um or not book, awesome podcast that I want to listen to more episodes on. As far as a book is concerned, I've been kind of leaning more into like leadership books, and how can I just be a better leader for my team. This is my first time being a chief creative officer at a
Mhm.
company, and so first time being in the C-suite. Again, imposter syndrome. Like, I'm like, am I really going to be a good leader? How do I become a
Yeah.
better leader? Leading some of these different organizations, I've done a lot of like self-reflection of like, how do I come at this and like build internal skills so that I can help the people around me grow. And a book that I just finished not too long ago is called Knowing Someone, and that was a really insightful book of just how do you listen to people, and how do you get to know someone on your team for who they are and what's important to them. And I think that there's pieces and parts of that really resonated, in the sense of, as a leader, as like a manager, as like a senior leader person in a company, like how do we identify the people around us for who they are, what they need, and how we can help them grow so that they feel encouraged and safe, and also how do we build those skills within ourselves to be the type of leader that we would want for ourselves too. And so it's kind of like the self-reflection of how do I engage with other people, but how do I make those moments more impactful for that person in front of me. So yeah, I think that those have been a couple of different resources that I've been looking at lately that have been helpful for me.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to add those to the show notes so everyone can find them. I'm going to check them out for sure. Founders I do know of. I haven't listened to that many episodes, but every now on the drive it comes on. So I'm going to check that out again. Yeah.
They Acquired is another one that some of my friends.
Oh yeah.
I haven't listened to Acquired yet either. But I need to. I should dive into that one.
Yeah, it's a good one. They actually had a huge event in San Francisco or Seattle. I forget where they sold out an arena somewhere. So yeah, it's a big show. But yeah very. I really like that. Enjoy the hosts there. They're very articulate and they know their stuff. It's a good listen for sure. Dana, thank you so much. It's been an honor to have you on. I can talk for hours. You are bursting with creativity and joy, and I'm so happy that you came on the show and shared your stories with us. And thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really grateful for the opportunity.
We'll run it back in a while and see how technology has evolved even further and what other games we've played recently.
Heck yeah.
Now, AI Anna is going to read us out, and that's the show, everyone.
Thank you for watching and listening to Makes You Wonder. If you enjoyed this episode, do us a solid and hit that subscribe button on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Amazon, or wherever you get your podcasts. For extra karma, please share with your mom and your friends too. Makes You Wonder is made with love by Wondercraft, the AI audio studio for brands and creative teams. It's hosted by Oskar Sarander. You can find Oskar on LinkedIn, X, and Threads. Links in show notes. This episode was produced by Alex Hughes Morgan. It was edited by Zaina. A nice young man named Dimitri from Wondercraft was the executive producer. Learn more about Wondercraft at wondercraft.ai.